Okay. Namaste. In Swatantra Bharat 75, the genius of India as a key to the crisis of humanity, we today have a very distinguished expert speaker, Dr. Nilesh Oak. Nilesh, welcome to you. It has been a great privilege to have you here. And I'm sure your today's session will be adding a lot of value to this entire process we are trying of getting a lot of experts and how the genius of India is not only for the uh, dawns of the yesteryears, to quote Shri, but also for the noons of tomorrow. So we belong to the future, not just to the past, and that was the whole endeavor, the essence of the endeavor. So let me start with some of the questions, and I'll be very happy to get information about all these things from you, and I'm sure many people will be interested. What we see is your whole, path-breaking research over all these years in the field of Indian history, especially dating of Ramayana, Mahabharata, and your talks on Suryasiddhanta and Gita and several other we have been hearing, and it has been really amazing and also inspiring because I don't see such efforts done by many people. May not be done by anyone actually, if I can say that. So it's a very path-breaking or sort of a new way you could venture into. My curiosity was how you thought of taking this type of path, because if I heard you before, you also mentioned that your childhood was from a sort of a semi-urban or rural setup, you can say, and then of course your parents encouraged you to read a lot, and then you slowly got your engineering and postgrad and MBA, US, and working in very coveted positions. So, and then suddenly turning to this entirely, you can say, uh, towards this dating of our scriptures and epics and also. Can you just narrate some of your this journey? Can you just tell us something about this?
Yeah. So, Namaskar, Narendraji. So this is great. And you summarized it well. So let me not necessarily repeat what you said. I did grow up in a village actually, and now that my hair are gray, and I was very fortunate to just had great opportunity or opportunities to go around the world, live in different countries, practically visit all continents. I also like to interact with people wherever I go. I mean, right, whether it's a China or a Spain or South America or even Alaska, it doesn't matter. Because then only you know the local culture. I mean, otherwise you stay in a hotel and go to see a museum and their top 3 attractions. You really don't know. You see the same tourist, maybe even from your own country. And the reason I'm saying this is, and even I'll bring that to the context of India, that whereas, and this is not against the urbanites at all, but whereas people would think, so or let's say from Maharashtra or Mumbai, I'm just taking as a typical bias, so someone sitting in Mumbai, I mean, I grew up in Mumbai, I spent significant time there. We think of somebody from Bihar as immediately backward person, just like in Europe or America, they would think of people from India as a backward. That is the standard bias. And as I got a chance to interact with these people, I have many friends and wonderful researchers who work with me around. What I found is that your experiences are responsible for how even you think and the curiosity that you build, many people, like I asked the question, now I have sold aircraft engines and all that. So I asked not because of that, but even before, when I was like a 6-year-old, I remember anytime I saw a aeroplane going above my head. This is, I grew up in Konkan, like near Chuprun, Gohagar area, but in small village. And I always used to wonder where exactly this flight is going from. What's the starting point and what's the end point, the destination. I mean, it's as simple as that. Or how does that darn thing fly? And so if you have this curiosity, and it doesn't remain just a kutuhal in the sense of idle curiosity, then if you start looking for it, this is the experience of many, you can say, philosophers, many scientists, many of our great sages, realized people, that if you have a curiosity, if you have a question that you want to find an answer, and if you actively look for it, almost the universe conspires and universe starts providing the answers. And I would say that is what it is. So what you said is actually correct. That's not to say that I started from a scratch. I stand on the shoulders of many great folks. But if you have a curiosity and if you have that fearlessness, but also humbleness, then you learn from the successes of your predecessors, and you also learn from their failures. And the hope is that you said, this is not about the past. This is about the past, present, and the future. And the hope is that the people who follow you and me also have that curiosity, also have that fearlessness and humbleness to look at our works, look at our successes, but also our failures, and learn from those. So that's what my journey is, just the pure passions, curiosity, almost at everything. And I can credit my parents. One quick, another point I will mention. This is something I realize now, by the way. When I was growing up, I mean, that's all I knew. That small village is what I knew. I couldn't have thought in this particular fashion. And this may not be true of all villages, but at least the village that I grew up, I find now in retrospect fascinating that how intellectual that place was. Intellectual, not in the postmodernist and the whole stupid, the academic jargon, but how much knowledge existed. I mean, my parents were teachers, that did help me, but there were other teachers and even ordinary folks of life, or even a simple grocer. The grocery shop was actually like a university, now that I think of it. So that is something undermined or not understood. But this is something very fascinating. And when now I talk to people who have also grown up in villages of India, in other parts, I find that parallel. Thank you.
It's something, from that roots, actually, when you are close to the root, close to the nature, especially, yes, I can identify because incidentally, I'm also from Konkan. So that whole, that land is fertile in every sense, especially fertile in gray matter. A lot of great people have been produced from that land. So I can understand what maybe you are telling. Reading also, from the very beginning, you must have been a great reader. And
yes, I mean, again, my both parents were into reading. I mean, teachers also, but not doesn't mean every teacher is a reader. Like my brother, who is also a primary teacher, still living in Konkan. Now he is has that native intelligence of his own. And he does things like, he's into cow rearing, organic farming, and various things. But my point is, he's not a reader. So no, I'm not saying everybody will just be a reader.
Okay.
By the way, he fascinates me. And that fascination also I kind of developed in last 10, 15 years. When we are talking on the phone, I will ask, I'll say something about something happening in America. And immediately he will add, you can say, a tippanni to it, And I'm saying, oh, okay, wow. So you know this? I'm talking like, say, going back 20 years when solar power or wind power was there, but it was just starting up, picking it up. And he had already put a windmill in his farm. Just got done through local carpenter and lohar, sutar, whatever you call it, So something fascinating. But back to the question you asked. Yes, so I was a voracious reader. In fact, because being a village, the school library was so small that I read every single book, whether I understood it or not. Even I continued that for more or less until high school. Then the problem is when I went to the college, the library was so big that there was no chance of me reading everything. But that was my habit, that anything and everything that came across, I read it. Is just to tell you the idea of a village. The only new thing that every day showed up in the village was the Maharashtra Times, the newspaper. And I couldn't go there every day. And I'm talking, I don't know, even I wasn't going to school, like 5-year-old, 6-year-old, but maybe even afterwards. On the weekend when I go, I used to go there, pull all the 5 or 6 days of worth of newspaper and actually read from the right top left-hand corner to the bottom right-hand corner, trying to make sense of whatever that I could understand. Yeah. So that definitely helped me. It builds the background knowledge that you need.
Mm-hmm. And that's so important because we need that, something surrounding the main theme. There are a lot of other things which are surrounding. That only comes when you are, you know, a lot of subjects, not just the one subject, but a lot of subjects you're aware of. I think that somewhere connects. Yes. I also seen many of your, in fact, I have been following you quite some time, and now that's why I could I was eager to have this conversation. I have seen many of your talks. You mentioned about a particular method of research by arrived at those conclusions. Uh, and that method was something very unique, means that diagrammatic representation of a triangle. And then there is you say this is a logic of scientific method, right? In a triangle format, where something, like theory is on the top, and then there is a explanation evidence in one point in the triangle. There is a objective testing on the other side. And then we have prediction and inference on the third. And background knowledge. I think we were just touch upon that point in the previous question. There is a lot of knowledge which is, as a substratum or something like that. Can you please explain us this whole method, because that will be very interesting.
Right. So I would say, just as a starting point, I may say actually it's a common sense. Okay. But if we just leave it at that, then everyone is going to be confused, because then everyone thinks they have a common sense. The cliche, right? The common sense is not common, So then we need to give a formal structure. Just start with the modern science. Many people have said it, like Richard Feynman. I mean, he's absolutely a wonderful personality, Nobel laureate Richard Feynman, physicist. And he says it in a very humorous fashion also. Sometimes when he's serious, people don't understand his humor. Now, he passed away in 1988 or so, I think. And sometimes he would be humorous and people think that is serious. That's the fun, like this. Or Sir Karl Popper, who is considered one of the best, if not the best philosopher of science. And he explains like what you just described. He says, what is science, or what is scientific method? He says, essentially, it's a triangulation of explanation, prediction, testing. Those are the three corners of a triangle in the context of a theory and in the context of a background knowledge. Now, why do we do this? We do this because there is some problem that we are trying to solve, like an unsolved problem. An unsolved problem cannot be trivial. Then it's actually not unsolved, because either nobody cares to solve that problem, or it is so trivial that you can solve it. Many people can solve it, and it doesn't matter if there are multiple solutions. We are talking of a toughest unsolved problem, because that is not been solved by the previous theories, previous Siddhanta, previous Prameya, whatever you want to call it. And that's why this is a big deal. Also, time and time again, in fact, without exception, when you tackle a unsolved toughest problem, and if you are successful in solving it, then you make a revolution. Okay. Now I want to take it a bit further, which is to say, yes, it is a scientific method, but as soon as we think science, many times, at least in the Indian context, and hopefully it is, and slowly it is changing, people immediately think science means Western Europe. Newton, Kepler. Even I grew up thinking, I might have said this story, and I don't know if you heard it somewhere, but when I was in the 9th grade, and in the physics or science subject, there was something about optics. And my teacher, and it was there in the book, I think, but my teacher said, okay, so this scientist did something further in optics, like some law or something. And that name was Indian. Actually, it was a Marathi name. I forgot whether it was Deshpande or something like this. And I was like stunned. And I'm saying, this is unbelievable. I mean, how can Deshpande be a scientist, or whatever that name was? Because until then, we have heard the name. At least I had heard the name. It's like a Kepler and Einstein and Edward Jenner. And doesn't matter. It cannot be Indian. Now, this is our biases. The reason I'm mentioning is that what we call modern science, or what I just described, the method of science, it is a small part of what we call in the Indian tradition, Indian Darshana Shastra. So there are many Darshana Shastras, but prominently say 6 Darshana Shastras, the Astika Darshana Shastras, you can say. Out of that, Nyaya Darshana, and now that I'm studying it more, I find the scientific method is a very small but important part of the entire Nyaya Darshana. It's a very small part. So modern science is trying to catch up with Nyaya Darshana. It has 1,000 miles to go, possibly from here to Pluto, that much distance. Okay, which is I learned backwards, because my journey started with the modern science, and I kind of went like that. So quickly, I want to give you a parallel with this. For example, what you just described, the Nyaya Darshana says it. It says, Sage Gotama is saying Pratyaksha, Anumana, Upamana, Shabda, Pramanani. Now, how we individually make discoveries, inventions can be in 10 different ways. Like sometimes we may get a dream, and might say, oh, let me just work it out and see if it works. But now if I have to tell people, I need a certain methodical fashion, which is what we talk about, the triangulation. And in the Nyaya Darshana, it talks about the 16 things, padartha, that elements that one must know, subjects, are ideas to understand Nyaya Darshana. And one of them is a avayava, which is to say, you know something as a swarthanuman, you have understood. How do you make others understand? Pararthanuman. And there it says the avayava has a 5 steps. Actually, it even has a 10 steps, but I'll take 5 to match with the modern science. Therefore, I said modern science is catching up. It has got to 5. So for example, it says pratidnya, meaning what's your objective? What are you trying to assert? Pratidnya. Okay. Then hetu, reasoning, which is your theory. Then you give a drishtanta or udaharana. Because no matter what, we always use a drishtanta to explain even the science. I'll just take quickly 2. When Newton was explaining theory of gravity, so that people understand, he was saying, because he finally got his puzzle solved when he defined the motion of the moon, because moon was really troubling him for 15 years. Moon is the hardest motion to predict. So he was explaining, he's saying, imagine you have in your hand a rope. At the end of it, you put a spear or something, and you keep on rotating like this. It is like that, he was saying, it is like there is an attraction, there is an attractive force, a tug. Tug is the word almost used by him, between the 2 bodies. Because of that drishtanta, that's not what he meant. He was just giving as an analogy. And then there is an actual application, which is equal to F equal to ma and whatnot. And then therefore, hence proved, hence the theory of gravitation proved. That is the 5th statement. Those are the 5 steps. But because people, and this happens all the time, people will confuse the drishtanta with the actual reality. And so they were asking him, okay, so you are saying there is attraction between the planet and the earth or the sun. Now, where is that rope that connects these 2 bodies? Okay. But my point is, so it is a avayava aspect of Nyaya Darshana, which is essentially the framework of modern science. So therefore, I'm saying this is one of 16, and even not the whole avayava that is being captured by modern science yet. So there is a long way to go. But what modern science does with those 5 is fascinating. I mean, that's how we are talking to each other through the online platform.
I mean, this whole idea of what do you mean by knowing? I'm just taking should I wait for a pause or something, or I can go ahead?
No, you can go on here.
So the whole idea of knowing, how we know something. I think Indian philosophers or all darshanas have thought in such a depth about it. What do you mean by knowledge, first of all? Because all modern world is talking about information, data, this and that. But basically, what is knowledge? What do you mean by knowing? I think that's a great question. I mean, maybe the peculiarity of Indian mind, or Indian genius, is to ask the right questions and go to the depth of everything rather than just, as famously Upanishads say, that what is that by knowing which I will know everything. So I want to know that. I don't want to know all this paraphernalia of it. Is it something like that, asking the right things and understanding the whole process of knowing in more detail? Is it something to do with that?
Yeah, that definitely that is, which is, think of like a epistemology versus ontology. I mean, these people can use some long, tough words, complicated word to impress people, but you said it so beautifully. So epistemology is like knowing the limits of what we can know. Okay. And at some point, if we get into consciousness, then we'll talk about like why modern science is stuck, but epistemology is the limits of what we can know. And then ontology is actually when we know how we figure it out that this is true, or what it means to say something is true. What does that mean? Again, we can get too detailed onto it, but say Nyaya Darshana, well, actually all of our Indian narratives or Indian philosophical systems or darshana systems, we may hear the same word, like say jnana or vijnana, knowledge, whatever the word used to say. So take Daya Darshana just for a limited sense. So Jnana in a sense of a knowledge. But what we understand is he's a jnani means whatever he knows is correct. That's how we understand. But that's not how Nyaya Darshana understands, which is what you alluded to. You said there is a data and there is information. Somebody may have a lot of information, but that doesn't mean it's correct. So actually it says that's a jnana, but then now you have to ask, is this like a true jnana or not true? Is it true or not true? And then how you go about figuring it out, that is the ontological aspect, which is what Nyaya Darshana emphasizes. Now, let me just take over, just to suggest one, and then we'll at least stop on this one. Now take another darshana, Sankhya Darshana. This, of course, originally Kapila, but what is today popular is Ishwara Krishna's Sankhya Karika. Beautiful, 72 verses. It's funny, the experience we talk about now. I just said beautiful and 72 verses. You won't believe I'm getting goosebumps.
Oh yeah.
Now, how can you explain this to someone, But maybe the simple analogy, again, the drishtanta would be if somebody loves vada pav, and I do, so I'm saying you think of a vada pav and your mouth waters, it's something like this, I would say. Like I get goosebumps, like 72 verses. But I'll just talk about one where he says the epistemology or limitations of knowledge. He says ati durat, ati sukshmat. If something is microscopic, you have a limits to what extent you can go. Ati durat, unless you have a telescopic ability, you will not know. How beautiful, right? And then even in that list, it talks about the limitations of our intellect. Ishwara Krishna talks about the limitations of our intellect. And I'm sure, Narendraji, you observe it every day. I observe this every day. The same book of mine or same talk of mine, 1,000 people would listen to it, and 1,000 people will get different, variated comprehension of it, which is understandable. But what is understandable, but also surprising and humorous, is two individuals will get exactly opposite comprehension, or therefore miscomprehension, or whatever you want to call it. And I was so fascinated when I talked about the goosebumps, because before it used to frustrate me when people don't get it right and something like this. And then, it's not point blaming them. People have their limited intellect. And Krishna talks in Bhagavad-Gita about the Sattvika Buddhi, Rajasi Buddhi, and Tamasi Buddhi. So once you understand it, I don't think it solves the problem, but at least it solved the problem for me, that I became peaceful at myself. I'm saying, hey, I shouldn't worry about if somebody misunderstands, misrepresents my work. I have to just do what I can do with my limited intellect. Yeah, so I think Nyaya Darshana, our Darshana Shastras as a whole, they are just, and this is not to feel artificially proud of our Sanskriti or anything. And my hope is that our people truly, the young generation, but old generation, everyone, it's not like old generation is wise or anything. Old generation is equally deracinated. I talk about 5 generations deracinated. Frankly, when I have a discussion, I say young people sometime, maybe because of their age, or at least somewhat, they will say, Cha Nilesh, please tell me. There may be some respect. Somebody who's older to me is extremely arrogant about it. Like, beta, what do you know? So they may not know anything, but they can come out like holier than thou. I think that's something we should be all aware of. We can learn from everyone, irrespective of the age. Like Ramdas Swami said, Thora lahana buddhi pasi, sagata kalena lokansi, adi upazale tayasi thora manati.
Wow. That's why Dattatreya did so many gurus. He said, I will learn from everybody. In our all traditions, every small story, tells a lot of insightful things to us. When you were talking, I was remembering, he said, everybody has taught me something.
Yeah. How beautiful, right?
Everywhere there is intelligence thing.
Yes.
And it can be seen by somebody who is intelligent. He can only see it, because correct. Otherwise it will be seen unnoticed. Is it like somewhere there has to be a connection between what you are seeing and what you are, that object and subject, somewhere that duality has to be
correct.
Maybe something like that. And we'll come to that as we come ahead, because we are going to go to consciousness as we go ahead. But before that, I was just wondering, you have on one side a lot of reading from Sanskrit texts. In our just beginning talk only, you have quoted so many. So a very good command on Sanskrit text and their insights. And on the other side, you are also well versed with the modern science and technology, and you have done a lot in that also. You see, they have like helped these two commands or these two sort of your skill sets somewhere been complementary, or they have somewhere clashed. How do you see this? Because they, as you just now mentioned, they look to be away from each other. Maybe you can tell us how they're in fact not away.
Okay, no, that's a great question. So you said like say Sanskrit, science and technology, for example, like my background into this. And you said I'm good at it. I appear to be good at all of them. Well, let me start with saying that most of my career was in sales, and I'm a very good salesperson. Okay, so I mean, on a humorous note, I will say, that's why I can come out as I'm expert in something. Now, of course, this conversation of ours, when it goes online, okay, some of the people with a very low intellect will take this clip, and saying, look, I was telling you, this guy is a salesperson, snake oil salesperson.
Yeah, that's a, yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I enjoy that when they say it, many times say, oh, he's just a good marketer. I said, no. Actually, I'm a good salesperson. Marketing is not my background, but thank you for the compliment, what happens is, again, just my limited experience, everyone can have a different path. That we talked about curiosity, and then not just idle curiosity, but you're not saying, oh, I wish somebody gives an answer to that question, but you said, no, darn, let me find out. I mean, can I find out? How can I find it out? Where can I begin? That passion, I think, drives, and passion kind of breaks the barriers, it just takes it away. For example, I have no formal training in Sanskrit. I would have loved to do it, but it was not available in the school I went. Sometime 8th, 9th, 10th grade, you have that 50 Hindi and 50 Sanskrit.
Yeah,
that wasn't
very limited. Yeah.
Even that wasn't the choice in my school. So I had to be stuck with the Hindi. It wasn't that. But, and I cannot even actually answer the question, how or why I understand whatever limited Sanskrit I understand. Now, people can say Marathi is a very young language and, very close to Sanskrit, and just like Gujarati is, pure Hindi is, and many of the languages of India. But I cannot answer that. But what I can tell you is that, of course, because of reading and practice, and I was reading Bhagavad-Gita from my childhood, like initially Vinoba's Gitai, like that's what my mother introduced me to. Then when I went to high school, our high school was such. By the way, what part of, did you grow up in Konkan, or your ancestral connection?
No, I was, ancestral connection. I was from Thane in Mumbai, but our native place is Konkan.
Okay, which place do you know? Happen to know which village or anything?
Yeah. Mandangad is our native place.
Okay.
Is Vindhyavasin, Chiprun.
Okay. Okay. Right.
And I love from beginning because my maternal grandfather is also from Srivardhan and Janjira and Almurud. So we have grown all our childhood. We have spent in most of the vacations in Konkan.
Correct.
We get connected somehow. I don't know, but
yeah. So right. So as a Bhagavad-Gita, then the high school that I went to, which again near Chiprun Guhagar, that high school we had to, I don't know how it is now, but in every grade we have to have one adhyaya of Bhagavad-Gita by heart, okay, in Sanskrit. And not that we necessarily understood, but and then in the morning, if the teacher is in the mood, like a class teacher, right, he'll say, while he's trying to figure it out or she's trying to figure it out, say, okay, stand up and all of you sing chant the whole chapter. And so, when you are doing it often, so like ye shastra vidhi musruja yajante shraddhayanvita tesham nishta tuka krishna sattva you're just saying, okay, slowly over time. That's the beauty in a way. Again, that's why I say I don't understand how you do it. So you don't know what language you're saying it, Sanskrit being a bit of a removed from this because of our current education system. But over time, you start almost understanding it. So for example, when I say Trivida Bhavati Shraddha Dahinansa Svabhavaja Satviki Rajasi Chaiva Tamasi Chetitam Shrunu, I'm not talking of now, But I'm talking of when I was like a 10-year-old, 12-year-old. And when I read it, I'm saying, okay, yeah, this is a Sanskrit, not Marathi, but ye Shastra, Vidyam, I can understand a little bit here and there. I think that's how it happened. Frankly, that is true about science and technology, which is to say, John Wheeler of Princeton has said it, find the toughest problem, try to solve it. And Karl Popper talks beautifully, which is to say, how do you solve how do you, like, if you want to do something, how do you do it? John Wheeler said, start with the toughest unsolved problem. And Popper says, go solve that problem. And you say, how do I solve it? Then he says, first, before solving, truly understand the problem. And then you say, oh, how do I truly understand the problem? He says, try solving it. You see, it's a very circular kind of
say circle, yeah.
Yeah, but that is what, when we talk about in the Indian system of doing the Marathi Pade, like the multiplication tables, or chanting the Atharva Shirsha or Purusha Sukta without even understanding, it eventually takes you there. Even Purusha Sukta, I would say for most part, I know the meaning simply by chanting many times and eventually thinking what they might be saying, Sasra Shirsha, Purusha, Sasraksha, Sasrapa, not referring to any translation. And this is not my genius. I'm just saying this is the genius of our great sages who developed certain methodologies. I don't know if I answered your question, but let
I mean, it was very interesting because somewhere, all that whole process you have been mentioning from beginning, it is a curiosity and, trying to find out yourself. That jnana, we say it is a, jnana is the whole basis of the whole quest and other thing. And to reach there, no matter what, that type of must have been a very, sort of ceaseless effort in that direction, probably. So, yes, I got, so like, I always get fascinated actually when somebody tries to, connect these two things somehow, because as you mentioned before, sometime the things which look opposite actually are somewhere connected at the higher consciousness, if I can use that word now. At a higher consciousness, these two things are actually complementary. They are all connected.
Correct.
At the lower level, people feel that they are all opposite and, sort of against each other. That is all because people are not raised to that probably height from which that height from the, like a top of the mountain, you see that all villages are connected, and you come down, you see they are far away from each other, something like that maybe. So that also means, in that whole process, a person is also somewhere, he's also getting to a better and better understanding and level and of his comprehension as well as his consciousness, maybe we can say. Yeah, that is wonderful actually. And we see that happening all over, especially you mentioned John Wheeler and many other names. I think this is happening from Fritjof Capra, and then many of the people have tried in that direction. And I was wondering, I mean, how, where this whole thing is now going. Maybe one day, like Swami Vivekananda said, that all science is finding a unity, and has been always emphasizing it is the unity which is the basis of the whole thing. So, so I mean, is it going to get now to that end somewhere? How do you see this?
Okay, well, I'll quote Richard Feynman. See what he said is that we as a humanity, we as an individual or as a society know a lot more than what science can keep up with. Which is to say, we have, say, we just give a simple name like a yogic experiences, samadhi experiences, mystic experiences, right? And so the experiences are real. I mean, again, just to avoid the digression, I'll not tell you some of my experiences. I mean, to the person who has no training whatsoever, that, I mean, not you, but the listeners might find it trivial and say funny and says, what about it? But to me, it is my experience and I just know. So without going into the details, I will say, suppose in my office, like I'm sitting in my office, and one time, this is going back, say 8 years ago, there was no context for this particular news that came to me. And I was just leaving for India the next day. And I just had my last call and I was going upstairs. And it was March and it was a bit getting hot and my shutters on the front door were closed and bell rang, so I don't know even who to say. Now, ringing a bell is not an unusual thing. I get all those FedEx and, all these packages every day. So 10 times a day. So that's not an issue. But when that bell rang, it is the same bell, like the standard doorbell. I thought it's going to be this. And I cannot tell you how or why that thought came to me. It's totally not linked to my upcoming travel or anything else. And it was, I will not go tell you the detail, but it was a bit of a fearful news that just came to my mind, that this is going to be this. And it wasn't like, could it be this? Somewhere inside my mind, the thought came, it is this. And then just so I went and I opened the door, and that's exactly what it was. No, but what is the beauty is, because I had this inkling, whatever you want to call it, intuition, just say 1 minute before I actually went and opened the door. Even when that news was in a way scary, in a way not the pleasant news, and not connected with my current consciousness of that day or a month or something like this, it did not surprise me, number one. Second thing, it did not shock me as much as it would have shocked me otherwise. And I took this as some kind of a higher message, because I knew before even I opened the door, okay? And I said, you know what? It's somebody is behind me, like somebody's hand is on my shoulder, and I can deal with this. And so without going into detail, I'm saying, see, now how do you explain in this 5-step science? The answer is you cannot. That doesn't mean there is no scientific explanation for it, but our science has not evolved. Our science has not evolved. Our technology has not evolved. Possibly our mind is not evolved to create the thought experiments where we can objectively test it. But our Darshan Shastra will tell it has to be tested objectively. Even Shankaracharya, when he's talking of a Vedanta, is saying the Brahma is not something to be imagined. It is to be experienced.
Experience.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
That is something again fabulous. Coming to some specific things which have fascinated me truly. I remember some of your lectures on Suryasiddhanta, and it's a common notion that Suryasiddhanta is something like 1,500 years CE. That is it's 1,500 years back from today's time, roughly, people like say. And then you come forward and you said with some very firm, analysis and data, and you are saying, no, that's not going to be the truth. And in that process, I remember somewhere you mentioned that, if the Suryasiddhanta is mentioning 24 degrees as the, specific
obliquity
of the Earth axis. And the Western critics say that, look how approximate these people are. They don't know the exact value, 23.4 or something, right. And they're giving value, approximate value. That means these people are not very scientific. And that means the whole writing of having accurate equipments is wrong. I was really like that whole point and your narration. I would like to hear from you once again, if possible, that how you have refuted it wonderfully. And you said that no, exactly means that actually we are right, because
yeah.
Can you just tell us something?
Correct. Thank you. No, this is truly fascinating. And again, we are just instruments of the higher power that we don't even recognize, so it gets done through it. For example, the Arundhati Vasishta that you would have also listened to it.
Yeah, that is another wonderful. Yeah.
And what I say is, because when I look at our past researchers, like say Lokmanya Tilak, Shankar Balakrishna Dikshit, V.B. Ketkar, Lele Shastri, just Pava Kane, I can go through the list, and I'm not biased, but just randomly, even the names I took are from Konkan, So, and then these are all world famous personalities, Bharat Ratna and Lokmanya and all that, right? But that wasn't my point really. So they could have, my point was someone like Lokmanya Tilak, such a bright mind, and not, in the astronomy and mathematics and everything, he could have figured out Arundhati Vasishta like this, or Shankar Balakrishna Dikshit like this, or Lele Shastri, or V.B. Ketkar, or Pava Kane. So why it has to wait until Nilesh? And I'm saying, what? Somebody up there said, no, Nilesh also should become popular for something, So it's really the instrument that working through us. But back to Suryasiddhanta. When the Western scientist or Western Indologist, when they came to India, they become aware, and they see, to their credit, they understood how valuable this was. They started getting their resources, translating it, transferring the files to, Europe, wherever, France and, England and Germany and whatnot. And they spent hours. I mean, we must acknowledge their tapasya that most of us are now just don't even understand. Like the word tapasya, and we say that's Sanskrit, that's backward, and I don't want to do it. It's that foolish and stupid. Now, just to set the record straight. So yes, in Suryasiddhanta, there is something, some update you can say, that does point out to 1600 years ago or 1400 years ago. So something that was changed there. Now, what Western Indologists ended up doing, because yes, they were interested in Indian knowledge system, but they had their biases. Like all of us have our biases. One of the bias was to them, this is like 300 years ago, 200 years ago, even until 1950, they were still believing, and even there are people who still believe that the whole world began 4000 BC, 6000 years ago in the Western lingo, okay? So because they are thinking like this, and even when some reference from Suryasiddhanta was pointing something else, they said this has to be wrong, because something else that they believe, which is wrong, but to them it is true. So that was the one problem. The second one, they were coming here to oppress, coming here to exploit the country. They also had these biases that these are the savages, they are the civilized people. So those biases also played their role, and that happened. So now to our technical thing, what I found, what my co-researchers have found, and many other great researchers. So myself, Rupa Bhati, but also Dr. Anil Narayanan, and there are many others who have worked on Suryasiddhanta. And there are these epochs, if you want to call it, like in specific instances where a update was made to Suryasiddhanta. So we can start from that 1400 years ago, around like 600 CE, we will say. Then we definitely have a evidence for an update going to say 3000 BC. We have another update at 5500 BC. We have another update at around 7800 BC. Then another update that you mentioned that Rupa Bhatti and myself presented at Oxford, going to 12,000 BC. So like 3-4 different points comes together from Suryasiddhanta, say, you know what, 12,000 BC, 12,000 BC, 12,000 BC, nowhere else. But that's not the end of it. There is another one going to 14,500 BC. And both Rupa Bhatti and myself, we have now found out that takes you back to 38,000 BC.
Oh my God.
And in Suryasiddhanta. Now, I'm not saying that is the only explanation. Somebody will say, actually, hold on, Nilesh, you have made a mistake here. Actually, this is what must have happened. But I can tell you, if somebody comes with an alternate explanation, it will also be a very deep antiquity. It may be 26,000. I'm just saying a random number, or it could be 68,000, not 38,000. But as is, unless somebody comes with a better explanation, 38,000. And so what was, so your question, so your question was like, they look at this 24-degree obliquity and they said, well, look, this is only 1400 years old. That time it was 23.4 or 23.5. And these guys are the foolish Hindus, right? They are measuring it so crudely, they're calling it 24. Now the joke was on them. They were thinking they are creating a humor about Hindus. No, that wasn't the case. Why? Because Suryasiddhanta, and actually Aryabhatiya also, but we'll maybe not go there. Aryabhatiya has obliquity of the earth mentioned as a number that takes you, just for a fascination, I'll tell you, that takes you to 24,000 BC. How's that?
Oof.
Aryabhatiya, but we will just leave that again today aside. But just because so much is there, even, I mean, my friend Milind Ranade, he's in Philadelphia. He says, when he and me discuss, just like you and me are discussing, he says every word or every sentence is a hyperlink. It can be clicked and you may go into another word. But just let me complete that 24-degree. So they thought 23.4 or 5 it should be. These guys are calling it 24. Therefore, their instruments or ability to measure is not good. Suryasiddhanta mentions the obliquity twice. One time it mentions as a 24. which is actually approximation, you can say. But another place, it mentions as in a very different form. Now, I don't know if you are a mathematics background or not, but R sign, meaning sign we do, but R sign. And it mentions as a R sign number is 1397. Now, what is the granularity we have? We have a granularity, I mean, the resolution is of 1 divided by 3438, 3438. That is the final granularity we measure. If it was 24, they would have said 1398 and not 1397. And of course, that 1397 is far, far away from 23.4. And if they wanted to represent 23.4, they would have done with a different number. Just imagine the beauty of it. I mean, this one, if anyone, whether an Indian or a non-Indian, still continues to repeat this nonsense, that Indians didn't know how to measure it accurately, then basically they should hang their head in shame. Because they don't understand Suryasiddhanta, they don't understand mathematics, they don't understand resolution. It is that finer. All that just references I told you in Suryasiddhanta, the updates, we can estimate those, like say taking it back to 5500 BC, 3000 BC or 8000 BC is the work of Dr. Anil Narayanan. And it is such a fabulous work that, only you can respond is by goosebumps, nothing else. It is that fascinating.
It's astonishing. I mean, there is no word. I'm not getting any word for that now. This is whole way the chronology of Indian history is absolutely astonishing, because thanks to this all Macaulay education and our the way we have been totally paralyzed in our education system. When I saw some of these chronologies which you have given and other people, as you mentioned, they have also given, like Mahabharata is 5561 BCE, Ramayana is even behind, like 12,000 something 209 BC you have mentioned. And for that, concrete proofs are given. I would like to hear, because you also mentioned Arundhati Vasishtha, which is one of the must ask question actually. So the whole, I think you had told there are more than 200 mentions of different astronomical positions in Mahabharata. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. And maybe 400 references in Ramayana. Will you tell us something about how this whole thing has been? And of course, Arundhati Vasishtha, just you can.
Okay. So quickly, the Mahabharata is. I started with Arundhati Vasishtha, and think of this as what we discussed: toughest unsolved problem. So until I started on it, few people had mentioned it. Like Pava Kane had mentioned it, Dr. P.V. Vartak, another great name. I mean, he had mentioned it. He had tried to even solve it in 3 different ways. Okay. And Shankar Balakrishna Dikshit mentions it. Pava Kane mentions it, as I said. Nobody could solve it. Now, what is interesting is there are hundreds of Mahabharata researchers. Okay, good number of them are not around, but there are, I would say, easily 50 plus of them around, like who would claim that I have done something in Mahabharata, or they will claim it at least. Not even a single living Mahabharata researcher, okay, with the exception of Nilesh, I would say. And of course, now there are many coming, but someone who will claim something, even dare discuss Arundhati Vasishtha. Now that when I brought up into this discussion, now they are all busy fighting how this is not important. Okay. It is humorous, hilarious, and I'm glad that they do it, because I use it for an education purpose. I mean, I'm a teacher. There's a teacher in me genetically also, and no matter what. So I say, well, this is good. I will use it. So quickly summarizing, in case of Mahabharata, when I started, this is going back 2011, I had around 200 references. So you're right. Since then, every time I read, I find many others that I missed. Okay, so now I have 300 plus. Now, this is the beauty. This is how science works. Like, you make predictions for future, and if your theory is right, the predictions that you have made but not validated, they should also support your theory. So the additional 100 plus observations that I have found since 2011, they all also point towards 5561 BC, no exception. Okay. Same thing with Ramayana. Like, Ramayana has close to 600. 575 plus astronomy
My God.
references.
Oh.
And they also point to that particular date. Now, this is only astronomy. If you look at other references which can be objectively tested, then there are at least 10, 15 different sciences, like say archaeology, geology, geophysics, geochemistry, hydrology, like the river Nadi Vidyan, you can say, oceanography, climatology, genetics, physical anthropology, linguistics. I mean, you just have to go on and on. And linguistics, I don't consider that as a science, by the way, but that's another subject to discuss. All of these, if evidence exists in Mahabharata, Ramayana, etc., or even Rigveda, and just like you said, the connecting the dots, if we can connect, yeah, it points to those dates. It points to those dates and no other. That is something very fascinating from any disciplines of science.
And that is, I mean, truly, you can say, revolutionary. I mean, in the field of inquiry of our epics, I doubt if someone has even dared to put those dates, because as you said, there has been a lot of people will start arguing and they'll put a counter, because the whole thing is not getting digested, you know. And I was trying to find out why it is so much difficult to digest. Like you have mentioned in one place, I was just going through the Kal, you know, the whole the Yuga, and I'm not going in that because that can be another lecture. We can have conversation, the Chatur Yuga and the
we'll do it another time. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that will be great actually. And the whole evolution of the whole thing, and involution and whole that theory which India has so beautiful, as you rightly said, science is hardly approached that to some extent even now, the whole evolution theory, or whole, you can say, the time and space understanding probably. But why it may be so difficult for people to digest?
See, that is a great question, by the way, Narendraji, because we critique or criticize Western Indologists, and I think that's justified, and we should do so, because they continue to create additional nonsense, you know, so they haven't stopped their nonsense, you know. So yes, we should continue to do this, but we should also introspect. We should also look in the mirror ourselves, and, you know, say, okay, so they haven't done it. What have we done, or what have we not done, right? And so, of course, there are few people who are doing it. But at the masses, I mean, masses meaning I'm not talking common man. I'm talking among the, say, pro-India Indologists, or pro-India researchers. And what you will find, I mean, see, my direct contact with them, I would say through face-to-face or something, is in the last 5-6 years, since beginning 2016. Until then, you know, I just was happy doing my research and sometime publishing here and there, and that's it. When I started going to the conferences, or when I interact with them in many ways, and this is not a slight to those who are truly original in their disposition and genuine and sincere. It's not a slight on them. But I will tell you, there is a majority out there who will pretend, or who will come out as a pro-India researcher, or whatever you want to call it. But and you know, I have this discussion just like I'm having with you, with many others, where it's like a private discussion. Maybe this is the open discussion you and me are having, and I'm glad we are having this. But I'm learning from these other folks that I'm talking to. I ask them the question that you asked me. I ask them. I'm saying, okay, this person famous and blah blah blah. Why he or she cannot get this? Why this person cannot understand Arundhati Vasishtha? And then I get these insights from some of our very good swamis, or researchers and something. He says, Nilesh, they will pretend whatever the hell they want. They do not have Shraddha. And it sometimes begins with a Shraddha. So sometimes they have done it as a jugaad, you know, like, hey, they think like this is the wind is blowing in this way. Maybe this is where I can become popular. So they will go there. That is one aspect. That is not the only aspect. Other aspects I have found is, and my wife also helps me sometimes understand, that they have many times not read the background knowledge that we talked about, the agama, you know, they have not read anything besides what little work they have done. And if you point it out, like saying what you're saying is not correct, here is a reference from Mahabharata, Ramayana, wherever, their ego is so shaky, they get angry immediately. Even when you give a reference, they will usually not respond. So I'm saying there are, more problems, and we can make a whole talk on that. My point is, we as a civilization need to introspect, look into the mirror, And so it's okay to blame others, and rightfully so. But what are we doing today? And what I find, and there are bright spots, and I'm a very optimistic, ever optimistic person, so it doesn't bother me. But actually, there is there are say 130 different claims for Mahabharata. Even if you take today, the living individuals, possibly 30. But these people dare not come together to discuss, or they don't know how to discuss it. The scientific method framework, most people, I would say almost 99%, will refuse to entertain it. Now go figure. The situation is that pathetic on one level. Now the good thing is, I don't think only our situation is very unfortunate. That could be the case every time. I mean, if you look at the time of Lokmanya Tilak, I mean, how tougher situation it must have been for him, like in the Paratantra and all of that. In comparison to that, we have good, I mean, say likes of Modi, I mean, Modi ji from 2014. People ask, I just brought this up, not as a political subject or something. People ask me, so now that Modi is there, have you seen any difference? I'm saying people at least fearlessly talking about these subjects. They were not even talking about this subject. So yes, there is a huge difference. Yeah.
And that has to change now, because I mean, one more example I found, that when you think of all these, Sindhu Saraswati civilization, and thereafter taking it back to the plain, and
yeah, keep on going. Yeah, sorry, I'm just turning off. Yeah.
No, we can wait also. We can wait. If there is any call, you can take.
No, done. Yeah.
You have mentioned about Saraswati civilization. I mean, the disappearance of Saraswati. Another fascinating topic from Indian, remote history of India. And people again are not ready to talk much about that. But again, maybe because, as you said, that further takes us back, maybe something like 22,000 years before the Common Era. Is it that? And
yes, I mean, just a quick Saraswati thing is, I mean, Saraswati might have disappeared, or definitely everyone will agree that the Saraswati disappeared by 2000 BC. Okay, so 4,000 years ago. Now, you will also find some individuals who would say, well, Saraswati also existed afterwards. Even some records, documented records that Saraswati also flew like 1400 CE or something like this. And that could be matter of interpretation, because in that sense, you can say even Saraswati is flowing now. The Ghaggar Hakra River, periodic, like monsoon time, it does have a water, so it's not to say that it's not flowing. But the kind of Saraswati that is described in Rigveda, described in Mahabharata, described in Ramayana, what we can say is, so for example, Mahabharata, 7,500 years ago. And so this is what Mahabharata is saying. Mahabharata has like 100 plus, 200 plus descriptions of Saraswati. Now, if you take a geological data of last thousands of years, the state of Saraswati, that is, we know from the geological description, matches with the geological description of Saraswati in Mahabharata, and the timing, 7,500 years. If we go back to Ramayana, Ramayana has a Saraswati, but it's not like given as like that big river or anything. In fact, because Ramayana also happened on the eastern side, the more mention of a Ganga, Yamuna, and so on, that could be the reason, but Saraswati is also mentioned. The one that you're talking, like going back 24,000 years, like 22,000 BC and beyond, what that refers to is the grand Saraswati of Rigveda, like Naditame, Ambitame, Devitame Saraswati, or Giribhya, Samudra, like starting with high mountains, flowing all the way to the ocean. And if you look at the last 40 to 100 years of data, and literally the paper that came like last month, that kind of thing, it's very active field. What you find is the whole evidence, just like connecting the dots, fits so beautifully for Saraswati descriptions in Mahabharata 7,500 years ago, Saraswati descriptions in Ramayana 12,209 BC ago, and the oldest descriptions of Rigveda going beyond 24,000 years. So what I'm saying is, some descriptions of Rigveda of Saraswati cannot be any time after in the last 24,000 years. We have to go back. That is not to say in 24,000 years ago, that is the description. We might have to go back to 50,000 BC, 60,000 BC, 70,000 BC. I don't know if you listen to my Saraswati talk at Sangam, where I have said, the evidence shows Saraswati going back to 172,000 years. Okay, back. And actually it will go further back. I don't know, but something I'll mention again, how this science works. Like you make a prediction and then you do something, or you just wait and pray for the new evidence to come. It was Rupa Bhatti, one of my co-researchers, and me, like going back 5, 6, 7, 8 years, I don't even exactly remember. And the way we were analyzing this Rigvedic data, Mahabharata, Ramayana data. So we were saying, that time we said 24,000 years ago, but we said, no, that's not going to be enough. There was some other data that was telling us, especially research of Rupa Bhatti, that we have to go 100,000 years plus. We have to go 200,000 plus years. So we had made a prediction. Now we didn't publish it. I mean, we had not published papers. We still don't publish papers, and more than likely we may not publish papers. But we had predicted, Rupa Bhatti had said that the Saraswati has to be there 200,000 based on these references. Then those are not river references. Those are Rigvedic references, astronomy references, and some other references. So this is, we said something in 2014, 2016 or so. And then now there is a 2020 paper, first time, James Blinkhorn, saying Saraswati was there 177,000 years ago. This is how science works. It's very fascinating.
Very fascinating. Every time a new horizon is visible, and then you realize, okay, this is also not the end. Something more is further to that,
Yeah.
So something truly wonderful. And that's how the whole, the vision of infinity is like that. It is never ending. It goes ahead and ahead and ahead, as our text or all of us talk about. And just look at the contrast of it. If you look at all the textbooks, when I see on one side all this research and painstaking efforts and all, and then coming back to our school textbooks and the college and the university and the scholars talking, they say till now the same textbook is there, that 1,500 years back the Indus Valley civilization had a decline, and there was an Aryan invasion after that, and then after Aryan invasion they say the epic period is there. And how can be something so absurd actually, that they want to pull everything after 1,500 years before Common Era, in spite of all these things already revealed. Aryan invasion theory has been refuted by, I think, more than 8 to 10 branches of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So there's nothing left now to refute it. How do you see this anomaly? Even the children have to read the same thing.
Correct. Okay, so first thing, what you are describing and that I'm aware of, the textbook thing is actually very unfortunate. So let's admit that. That's very unfortunate. Number two, the Aryan invasion theory. It's very important to emphasize and re-emphasize that it was not established to begin with ever. It was a con job, okay, by really con people. And they still exist. They exist inside India and outside India, and they continue to pull this nonsense. And the problem is they are doing it because they get paid. They benefit from it. Why would somebody want to do a con trick? Because in some fashion they benefit. The question again is for us to introspect and look at the mirror and ask the question, why we let this continue? Okay. And many people think, okay, acha to bhai kuch karo. And see, again, I understand that every common man is not equipped to fight this, and that's rightfully so. But then what happens when they see few people, few faces, like say, there are many others, but I'm saying Nilesh, but many others. They say, Nilesh ji, kuch to karo, do something. And that is a problem because I understand they feel that koi karega to ye karega, something like this. But the problem is, it's important to understand. Those few people that you would know, there are many other names, Raju Malhotra, I would take, but many others. Whoever in our limited efforts, we are like literally to the brim, we don't discuss that because it will look like touting your own horn. But, my day starts at like 3 o'clock in the morning. I just get up and I come to my room and I start, if I get up, I just get up and I come here. At night, it will go to 11, 12 o'clock. My wife starts shouting, no, this has to turn it off. She will come and pull the plug kind of thing. Of course, she also does her own thing. And that is true for those people who are activists, which means we need many more people to come and become active. Okay, that's number one. The second one, you did not directly ask the question, but the question could be why government is not changing the books. Okay, now I am working with some of the government agencies, and yes, they can do more. That is always the case. We can say that, but they also have their limitations. Okay, the limitations in this way. If they change something, someone is going to start shouting. Okay, and that will happen no matter what you do. However, if government gets the confidence, I'm just pulling some number, random number, say it doesn't have to be that high number, honestly, but I'm just saying if government feels confident that the 70% of the population, 70% of the citizens are behind this, they really want it, and not just saying something, government will do it. Okay, because if you know what happened to those textbook controversy when the old government, I think it was a BJP government made some modification, then they lost the power and the other guys came and just created their nonsense. I mean, you just don't want to go back and forth like this. If they get the confidence that majority really wants it, it will happen. Now, I'm talking even the pro-Indic majority or pro-Indic researchers are not there. So some of the things I will say is a sheer lack of strategic sense. And I'll just, instead of going too deep detail, I'll give you one example. Why India? Even in America, you might have heard the California textbook controversy and so on. So where they put Mahabharata as a myth and Ramayana as a myth and so on and so forth. So when we were suggesting an alternate text, in Indian activist group, you can say. So now I am convinced about 5561 BC. Anyone with a basic sense of scientific method should be convinced. That is 5561 BC. But see, that's not what I was pushing, because I understand how these things work. What I was pushing for, I will tell you, and it didn't go any further, but I'll tell you, this illustrates the problem on our side. So what I said is, what is the range? I said there are 130 plus Mahabharata researchers, including Professor Hopkins of Harvard University 100 years ago, who, while sitting in a chair, relaxing and maybe having a glass of wine, he said, yeah, you know what, let's put Mahabharata at 400 AD. And people said, oh yeah, sure, why not? That kind of nonsense and bullshit, honestly. But it was there. I was willing to accept that. I'm saying, okay, as an opinion, why not put it? I said, so 130 different researchers around the world, their range for the Mahabharata ranges from 400 CE, Hopkins of Harvard, all the way to 7,300 BCE of Shankar Balakrishna Dikshit. He interpreting or critiquing the work of Lele Shastri. Okay, so that's the range. Just put it there, which means it was a historical event and people are trying to determine its timing and people are done their own jobs. Now the next person, a kid who is reading it, will become curious. So it's a one historical event or multiple? If it's a one, why there are so many dates? So let me find out how Hopkins figured it out 400. Let me figure it out how Shankar Balakrishna Dikshit did it, and it will go further. I'm telling you, our pro-India researchers, including some of the decorated researchers, and I'll leave the definition to you for what decorated researchers means, were against putting this statement into the textbook of America. And these are pro-India researchers. So that's why I will repeat, and we can go to the next question, that our folks also lack a strategic sense. Okay, so therefore I did not say put there 5561 BC Mahabharata War Happen. I said just even put it, this is the range, guys. Next time we will do the iteration and the kid will be curious enough and will say why people are doing different things, and we will make improvement. So people don't understand that the improvements, science also progresses in an iteration fashion, iterative fashion.
True.
Same thing with the improvement. So we have to make small improvements. The another last point, because I feel very passionate about this textbook subject, we as a citizens, as a researchers, as an activist, need to give a template to the government, which is to say the current textbook is like this. This is a problem, and here is the evidence why this is wrong, and it should be replaced with this. And why it can be replaced? Because here is the evidence, and something like this. And then also our social activists, I would say, educators and everyone must try to create an atmosphere where the government or these education bodies feel that they have a support of the people and they feel confident to go and change it. Otherwise, this will not happen. That is just my limited understanding of this textbook issue.
No, very true, very true. And this itself can become a separate, discussion, because it's a very, very important issue. So I stopped for the timing. I'm stopping for this question, but it's very important. I understand your what you have talked is a very, very important thing. Strategy, actually, the lack of strategy can make or mar the situation.
Right.
Coming to another question, another model which I found very fascinating personally is your use of Ikigai model to and imposing certain things from Bhagavad-Gita on that. The whole wisdom of you have mentioned it in Siddhartha's consciousness, on Ikigai, which is now currently very popular model, and then again adding something from Maslow's theory. I mean, how you get this type of connections? You also mentioned connecting dots to find out something, a pattern, something. Can you just explain? This particular model is really, I mean, superb.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So I actually, I mean, not that I'm holding any secret. It's like very difficult to say how it happens. But if you truly understand, I mean, see the Shraddha, I think it comes from a Shraddha and a belief. I mean, it comes from that, which is to say, just like Krishna says in Bhagavad-Gita, that the knowledge, this all adhyatmic knowledge or knowledge in general, like whatever you want to call it, it's not hiding in some corner of the universe. Like, in a 15th chapter, it says, Urdhva Moolam Adasyakam Ashwatham Prahuravyam Chandamsiyasya Pranani Yastam Vedasa Veda. Yeah. So it is not hiding. It is there in the trees. It is there in the branches. So again, a metaphor, again, a upaman that people will always misunderstand. The Ashwatha Vruksha, like the upside down Ashwatha Vruksha. And the knowledge of this Srishti is into branches and the leaves. Chandamsiyasya Pranani, right? And that is where it is there. So, which means the knowledge is not going to be restricted to India, for example, which means independent thinkers in independent places will also come up with a similar thing, right? Sometimes it is through the diffusion of culture and so on and so forth. And by the way, that is true with the Abraham Maslow's triangle. That is true. Are you familiar, Narendraji, with Myers-Briggs, the food network, like, personality profiling that is done in the corporations? True. Right? Abraham Maslow's the, Anna Vastra Nivara, and then security, and then recognition and self-actualization and so on, right? So think of it. First this, then security, then what you call, what is the next?
Social need, social need, and then ego, and then
ego, like the acknowledgement or doing something for your own fascination, and then self-actualization. Just for fun. Okay. So now, I would have connected there the talk you would have seen with the Ikigai's 4 points, which again, they will match always. But even let me pull something else. And this is, I'm just pulling right now as I think about it, like as I was trying to talk about it. Take the 4 types of Bhakta in Bhagavad-Gita. Artha, Jidnyasu, Artharthi, Jnani cha Bharatarsha. Okay. Now, if just as a crude comparison, I'm talking, if you put Artha at the bottom, then put Artharthi, in this case, Artharthi in the sense of a money, I would say, like a security, and not in terms of the meaning of the word or something, but that is also the meaning, by the way. Krishna doesn't mean Artharthi meaning the interested in money, although many people translate like that. So Artha, then Artharthi, then put the Jidnyasu, just for the heck of curiosity, they will go or something. And then Jnani,
the supreme.
Right? I mean, the person, even he doesn't know. I mean, he cannot control the way he or she behaves. That Jnani is going to do like this. I'm saying you can see these parallels like this. So let's take Ikigai. So what is that you are passionate about? What is that you have a skill? And does that match? What is your profession? Then what is your vocation? And what is your mission? Which is to say, in what way this helps anybody? Or are you just wasting your time and other people's time? If you bring those together, I can also take another word from Bhagavad-Gita And I'm just like I'm telling you how it's coming to me. So this is how it works, Narendraji. There is no secret method.
No, it's wonderful actually.
I'll put the word in the center called Swadharma. Shreyan Swadharma, you can say this, Swadharma is something that you are capable of, like a guna karma vibhaga chaturvarne maya srishtam, your inclination, your skill, your passion, and your abilities and capabilities, bringing it together and doing something meaningful. That's Ikigai, that is Swadharma, that is this. I think that's how it come together. One quickly I will add, the Myers-Briggs, even that has a connection from Bhagavad-Gita or the India. Not many people know it. Those Myers and Briggs, they were mother and daughter, and eventually at Harvard, they rolled out the model. They might have come out independently, but before they rolled out, they were not feeling that confident. Then they come across the world of Carl Jung or Jung, and then they felt confident. Now, where was this Carl Jung getting his stuff? At least the stuff that he was describing that they felt confident from India, from Vedanta and Bhagavad Gita. You can find these connections. Yeah. So sorry, I didn't put an answer how I do it, but that's why this background knowledge helps. And that Shraddha also is important, that, you are not the only one who has figured it out. There is one saying, when I was doing my MBA, one wonderful professor, he was a consultant to Bill Clinton during his presidential years and all that. I'm not getting the name right now, Rick Gilkey, I think. But I loved his quote must be from someone else. But he said, if you feel that you have found something revolutionary or extraordinary, something new, his quote says, go read old books. And you will find somebody, Yajnavalkya has already done it, something like that.
Yeah.
We can go to the next question.
That's also humility on one side, but also truth on the other side, because it's both maybe. That brings me to another fascinating subject. In fact, as I said, we need to talk a lot, but there is a consciousness studies and all things going on today in artificial intelligence, and everything is making total, center stage of our whole discoveries. But one thing which I found very curious, and maybe I would like to know your opinion and your understanding, insights in that, is already new physics has discovered that consciousness is the primary part of everything, and all the other things are secondary or derived from that. Consciousness is the basic of it. In fact, there is that consciousness is singular, of which there is no plural. I think Heisenberg or somebody, I don't remember, but they had quoted that. And this is right also. And India has said that since time immemorial, that Sarvam Khalvidam Brahmasi and all that we said. But in spite of that, all the research is going in the present times in this direction also, consciousness also. Again, it is based on some material model, some neurons and some, something like some material building blocks coming together. Only thing, it is making more and more complicated, but ultimately still, and very mathematical sometimes, like Penrose and all are making, but it still remains a very rank materialist and reductionist model.
Yeah.
That block actually, I mean, why it is not going to go to that reality?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, great question. And Narendraji, again, I'll try to give a short answer, but this itself is another.
Yes, we should discuss this. Yeah.
So now my background, very limited one, but very passionate at the same time, goes back into this consciousness in science, goes back to 30 years. I don't know how active you are in the social media. Somewhere one very what do you call, not very I don't know what's the name to give, but let's call somebody who is not very happy with whatever I do for whatever reasons of his own. So he read, but in an Indian psyche, he's like a very pro-India warrior, and in some limited sense he is. So again, without mentioning the names. So he read somewhere my biography, not biography, just introduction to something, where it said in my introduction that I have researches in philosophical issues of quantum mechanics. And, he used that as a point to scoff at it. He said, oh, this guy is a truly snake oil salesman. He claims all kinds of crazy things. He meaning me, that was this. Now, my background goes to 30 years and I don't have to see, now I have done enough Mahabharata Ramayana that I don't have to go and claim something that it was not there, but hey, quantum mechanics, I have done something. In fact, there is a lot of hot air in quantum mechanics, or consciousness. People will talk consciousness, Vedanta, and sometimes it gets very tiring. Even sometimes we have some individuals on our thing, like a Swami, like they will use the word consciousness and Advaita and this and that, but you can listen to the guy for 2 hours. I do as a speed thing for humor, and I say, what exactly is he saying? It's like he's talking about nothing, something like this. So we also have characters like that. But back to what you said it, Heisenberg mentioned it, Niels Bohr mentioned it. Many people, Henry's, I forgot the year now, late 90s possibly, like Henry Stapp, if you have heard the name, at Berkeley, Lawrence Berkeley Lab, California, Berkeley. He was in India. See, he was in India spending time studying Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy. Okay. He has even written, I have it, it's not handy. He has written a small monograph or some notes, observations. I have worked with or I know first name basis some of the folks in consciousness, in science and quantum mechanics and whatnot. What happened is I was working on different areas, and when 2009 finally I figured out the Arundhati Vasishta, it kind of took me in a totally different direction, meaning one of the directions. So it became more focused on this dating thing. That wasn't necessarily like the only thing I was doing. But back to answering your question, possibly what could be the problem? So your observation is correct. They are going more and more refined, more sophisticated. They're studying the model, like what is a consciousness, how we think, and what does thinking mean. But they still restrict themselves to the materialistic theory. That is true. Now, there are models, if you look at quantum mechanics, possibly there are 14 to 17 models, and you can split them more or combine them together. And then there are easily out of those 14, 16, there are 4 or 5, 6 models which are consciousness based. But to be fair to what you said, even those 5, 6 consciousness based models are also very materialistic, extremely materialistic. So consciousness, they will say, but they mean it's something emergence of consciousness.
Emergent, yeah.
So 2 points I have to say, like why this might have happened. It's only my 2 cents, because that's the area I'm very fascinated. I have done some original research, but unfortunately, because of my scope now going in different direction, I have not spent much time. One possible reason could be somebody that was well identified by Schrodinger, another Nobel laureate. He has said, we have gone this wrong path for so long, 200, 300 years or whatever you want to call it, even starting with the Hume, even going back to the 2 centuries before. The Hume and then Kant and Descartes and all that. He said, if we have gone this wrong fashion so long that if we want to really now make a breakthrough, we have to actually go back 200 years when we took this path and do the course correction there. Okay, there is no point somebody is just coming to you and saying, oh, so you have some new idea? Yeah, please tell me what to change here. No, it's not like that. You have to literally go back 200 years. So I think Schrodinger is, and of course you might have read his book, What is Life? And he's talking about the influence of Vedanta on him and so on and so forth. So that is one, somebody very genius like him has mentioned it. That's one answer. The second one is, I think we have it in our case, and then we cannot blame them though, which is to say, take Shankaracharya talking about it, or Bhagavad-Gita 2nd chapter. Now you might have to help me with the verse, but the Atma cannot be understood. It can, after saying it cannot be touched and all that, but he says, even if you try to understand it, some people try to understand it, some people think they understood it, but at the end of it, it is still a confusion.
Yeah, it is understood, correct.
Yeah. So, and then Shankaracharya talks about it, which is to say, you can experience it, but you cannot like describe it, I mean, all of that, right?
Yeah.
So if that is the case, then why are we demanding that it should be explained in terms of our modern science or something like this?
Yeah.
So if it is true, and we don't have to take the word of Bhagavad-Gita just at the face value, but if it is true that no matter how much attempt we put, it will still afterwards remain a mystery,
Mystery.
then why are we trying to demystify? I mean, again, I'm not saying we shouldn't try to demystify, but we should understand our limitations possibly.
Limitation of the whole process of, yeah.
Or the current methodology, which is again goes back to what Schrodinger said. That you have to go back 200 years, start the change, modify the initial conditions, take a different path. Like the Monte Carlo simulation, or the square root, you go in a certain direction, you have gone in the wrong direction too long. So small course correction will not work. And there are models. Actually, I know, again, some very original quantum mechanics researchers, first name basis, who have made significant advances, but that's a total different subject. And even I'm not necessarily a qualified person to represent what they have done.
But another, I think, very fascinating thing which we must somehow, look into, because that also is one of the core of Indian genius. And maybe I'm taking too much time of yours, but
no, we are good.
Actually, yeah. I thought I should ask all these things. That's why I'm taking just one last question. Maybe is that not only this genius or this deeper understanding of life was limited to philosophy or to our religion or spirituality. It came to the active life, and it came to the economics and the polity and the sociology. Everything, every part of life was actually pervaded by this understanding of consciousness is singular, of which there is no plural. I mean, if I just want to quote the same thing to take it back, that was it not reflected in everything? Yeah. I think you have mentioned this in some of your earlier talks also. That can you just throw a little light on that for us?
Yeah. And that what we can say is a sort of I mean, if you want to put it in a modern understanding, because see, Indians get so much influenced by what is taught in America, Europe, that they start thinking reductionist fashion, materialistic fashion, without realizing it, without realizing. I mean, you and me are into the same matrix, we may not realize, we think we may be spiritual, but we may be too materialistic because the influence is there. This can be differentiated as a very materialistic, very reductionist approach to life versus a balanced approach to life. That is the specialty of our Indian civilization. Or you can also separate that as a Eastern civilizations versus Western civilizations, or you can say native civilizations versus bit of Abrahamic civilizations. There can be different ways to classify this because a certain initial viewpoint, the initial conditions, what you think of the world. I mean, is this a place to get rid of? Is this the place to run away from? Or is this the place to enjoy? Or so like moksha is something after you die, or moksha is something to be experienced yachi dehi yachi doda right yachi here doda. And now. Yeah. I mean, so your philosophy kind of changes your approach. One simple example, and then I'll come to Indian one. Sometime a group of Americans went to Japan to observe the Japanese culture, and they were going through different places, Kyoto and Tokyo, and all these shrines, the Shinto shrines and Zen monks. And so afterwards, like you can call like a mixer, the American kind of people are sitting together and talking finally before departure. And an American visitor went to one of the Japanese individual professor, and he said, so after my 15 days of this interaction, if I have to summarize this, I said, whereas we have a philosophy, meaning on the Western approach is saying, it appears that you don't have philosophy, to the Japanese guy. Now, there is a difference sometimes between Japanese and us. I mean, the India I'm saying. You see, I'm talking general Indians. Indians immediately will go on the defensive. You're saying, what are you talking? We have the oldest philosophy and so on. Now, the Japanese fellow, the professor, he understood the intellectual level of this guy. Again, not to put him down, even the American guy who asked. That is his experience growing up, I mean, childhood. So the Japanese professor chuckled, smiled. And he said, you're right. We don't have a philosophy. We dance. Okay. Now, the reason I said this is that what you just asked the question. So yeah, yes, we have a spiritual advancement through darshana and through philosophy, Upanishad and Vedas and all that. But we are like into other things too, very pragmatic. And actually it is true. If you go and look at, say, Rigvedas, many times it is just simple pleasures, right? Hey, help me kill my enemy. You will hear that, or please give us the expertise so that we have our nutrition, we are free from any disease, and we get a long life, and so on. Extremely, I wouldn't say concerned, but even the pragmatic approach is there, that you want a joyful life. And in that joyful life, things will happen. And I think precisely because of that reason, even like thinking of the Maslow's triangle, the basics of it, which is you see in the Rigveda, like that is, what is that? Tvanno asya amate rutak shuddha abhishastu. Amatik shuddha abhishastu, like give me the wisdom, give me the food, and give me, good health and good life kind of thing. Because of that, we made progress. Indian civilization made progress and became really something that people really feel envious about. They did feel, and they feel envious now, except most of the Indians sometimes because of ignorance, of course. I mean, if they know it, then they don't. If they understand it, is because of that they made progress into astronomy, they made progress in agriculture, they made progress in navigation, and so on and so forth. Because they understood, unless you, I mean, Buddha said, right, unless you have a food in the stomach, no point listening to philosophy. So the Indian civilization approach is extremely pragmatic, and therefore it is non-dogmatic, I would say. Yes. And therefore I will conclude on that last question. Therefore, Yaskacharya said, Sanatano Nitya Nutana. This is something that is capable of and actually demands refreshing itself in an iterative fashion based on a time, place, and circumstances. Desha Kala Patra. Okay, or to that Sanatano Nitya Nutana is there in Jnaneshwara's Jnaneshwari also. When Gita, like Parvati asked Shiva, like, can you explain what is the essence of Bhagavad-Gita? And then he says, Devi jaise ka swarupa tujhe, taise he nitya nutana dekhije Gita tattva. Wow. That is why the Gita is also valid for our times, and it was valid 7,500 years ago and even before that.
That's something fantastic, and could not have concluded on a better note, I think. Nilesh ji, it was truly fascinating and very, very, you can say, enriching experience to have a talk like this with you. And we look forward to have more and more talks in the coming time, or having some, in fact, some plans and some things which can be done together. As you said, more people should come and start working on it, because already there has been enough load on the people who are in the center of the whole affair. So we'll work in that direction. We'll try to encourage people to take up small things, and whatever we can, try to contribute in that. We'll also encourage people to read the books which are now, I think, now published in India, written by you and now published. So all that thing we can do, actually. We are looking forward on behalf of Vivekananda Kendra Kanyakumari and Vivekananda Kendra Prabodhini. We really thank you from the bottom of our heart, and look forward to more and more discussions and interactions, so that we can do some seva, some sadhana in this direction of our, the mission which we have actually born for. I think, thank you once again, and thanks for all your deliberation, talk, and insights to us today. Thank you.
Okay, well, and let me thank you for all the work that you do. I may not necessarily know all that you do, but that you do. So you mentioned Vivekananda Kendra Kanyakumari, and I knew directionally, but I wasn't exactly sure. Long time ago, I did one 21-day yoga Shibir or something.
Yeah, Shibir, yeah. Sure.
This is going back 87, 88 or something like this, possibly, okay. that I had done. And yeah, I have this book, Eknathji Ranade, and how he essentially did the whole thing. So thank you. I mean, continue with what you are doing. We will find different ways. I mean, as you realize, every single line or word becomes a hyperlink. So we might take it. So thank you very much for inviting me, keeping up with me, being patient with me. So I really appreciate that. And thank you.
It was really a great experience. Thank you so much. Looking forward.